Welcome back to the Cameron James channel. If you are considering a transfer out of your Royal London defined contribution scheme in the UK, then you are in the right place to have a detailed conversation about it. I'm joined by our senior advisor, Jonathan Laws, from Richmond this morning. Jonathan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Nice and tan.
Yeah, the weather looking good in London. Right, John, on to Royal London. Now, I know you've dealt with a lot of clients in Royal London and you have a lot of experience working with them. So I'm going to pass straight over to you in terms of what are the key things that you see. I know you've done tens of analyses now of Royal London clients. What are the key things that you see and some of the key factors that make your clients ultimately decide, okay, right, it's time to stop this. I want to complete a transfer out into a SIPP or whatever product is most suitable for them.
Yeah, so I think for a lot of people, the first thing that kind of comes up is the costs. A lot of people are sitting in Royal London and sort of their managed solutions. You've got a certain menu of options you've got. They've all got very high charges and take your pick. And of course, a lot of that's all actively managed. Performance is often not the greatest in the world as well. So people are going, hey, I'm paying a lot of high charges. My pot's not growing that much. I mean, it's growing more often than not because obviously the markets have done so well over the past 15 years. But it's not growing as much as perhaps my mate in the pub, although, of course, take everything your mate in the pub says with a pinch of salt. And I want to look at other options to see, can I reduce my fees? Can I get better performance? What is out there and why am I sticking around?
Yeah, and just to give viewers an idea, do you have off the top of your head, I don't know if you've got data to hand, an example of some Royal London clients? And again, here at Cameron James, we're certainly not saying that because we've done an analysis of 10 or 15 clients, that is verbatim how everyone performs at Royal London. But generally, we have a pretty good understanding. There's certain providers when we get the reports through, we kind of know, actually, these guys aren't bad. The performance is quite good. Not as good as what we're recommending them to do, but still not bad. So Jonathan, do you have any rough ideas in terms of like 5-year performance of any of these client analyses that you've done?
Yeah. So, the one on the top of my head, what I'm just thinking of, it is someone we had get in touch about 18 months ago. We did the returns. I think they were as at, roughly the middle of July 2023. So, we're talking about, 2 years ago now. And when we put the analysis in, we added in all the different funds. I think he had about 16 different holdings. They were all denominated or called, the Royal London Pension, blah, 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 global managed, UK equity, etc. The 5-year return was about 13% in sterling terms. And the underlying portfolios were, I think it was about 0.97% in charges just for the underlying, investments. Unfortunately, he was in a pension scheme that covered off a lot of the sort of additional annual management charge you can often see with Royal London, but still paying the best part of 1% over a 5-year period, he'd only grown net just over 13%. Now, compare that to our much simpler, much lower cost, globally diversified approach, which had gone up nearly 45% gross over that period. So if we even with net of charges for this chap, had they have gone with Cameron James 5 years earlier, sold down everything from Royal London, moved it across to Cameron James, got all the ongoing amazing financial value add, which they had for the last 2 years and have loved, got all of that. And conservatively had a pension pot that would have been about 25% higher than what it was with where they were with Royal London over that 5-year period. And obviously, this is all based on our analysis that we did using the actual returns provided by the schemes and all the information provided there.
Yeah, and just to clarify for viewers, when we're putting together a DC recommendation report, we can't make up the numbers. We can't make up the numbers from Royal London, from Royal London. We also can't make up the numbers from Cameron James. Everything goes through the FE analytics. When we're putting together a DC recommendation report, it is our legal obligation to ensure the information that is correct. That means completing a letter of authority with our clients to their seeding scheme in the UK, which means we quite literally write off to Royal London. I mean, in this day and age, it's email saying to them, can we please have a full breakdown of all of your costs 5-year performance, etc. Royal London then physically send us that information. We have to document it. Compliance has to be able to see that we physically have the information from the scheme, and only at that point can it then go into our advice report. And here at Cameron James, our portfolio, everything is done by FE Analytics, which is the independent body in the UK that assesses the 5-year return or whatever year return you're looking at of a portfolio. So whenever we're doing comparisons here, this is real live data comparisons, and obviously we can't impact those. And Jonathan, I think something that I've noticed, I've been doing this for the best part of 15 years now, is that you have clients come through and say something like, oh, it hasn't done too badly. It's grown around 13% over the course of the past 5 years, not too shabby, nearly 3% a year. But they unfortunately don't realise that actually the equity markets have grown a considerably larger rate than that. Jonathan, what do your clients generally say? Are they aware that maybe their pension hasn't performed that well, or they just thought it wasn't too bad, or they just never looked at it and didn't actually really realise? I know you'll have a mixed bag amongst your clients, but generally speaking, what would you say is most common?
Yeah, I think with a lot of times when you've got these big household names, whether it's, Royal London, whether it's the old Viva, Prudentials of the world, a lot of people just kind of take it for granted that, oh, it must be doing well, it must be managed properly. I chose that, I had professional management, etc. So they don't look at it. And sometimes, as you said, sometimes they will look at it and they won't quite realise that they're not getting all the returns that are out there, but perhaps they're comparing it to what they're getting in the bank account, going, oh yeah, well, I only got 4% last year, but HSBC or whoever I'm banking with gave me 1%, so I'm quids in, and not realising that in reality they should have been getting 7, 8, 9% had they had a globally low-cost balanced portfolio. So those are sort of the main things. I'd say it's just a lot of people just haven't, and again, this is a big problem in the UK, hence why the FCA is trying to bridge the so-called advice gap, because a lot of people really are sort of sleepwalking into these years into retirement, not getting their ducks in a row, not making sure everything's planned for, and waiting too late to actually go and do it. And, these problems or issues or lack of growth, high fees, not saving enough, not planning for retirement, these are mistakes that if you make them 10 years before retirement, fine. You've got enough time to fix things, work with a good regulated financial advisor who can help you, rectify all of that. But if you're getting there a year before retirement, it might be too late. Hopefully it's not. And hey, get in touch. We'll do our best to salvage things. But you're really leaving to chance, how much fun you're going to have and how enjoyable retirement's going to be. You want to, do all those things you want to do, live the life you want to live. And trying to plan for that a year before retirement is probably going to mean you're going to fail, or you'll significantly reduce your odds of having a good retirement.
Yeah, I mean, so many things I can pick out of what you just said. First of all, I'm going to quickly say, so for anybody, Royal London, if you have a Royal London pension in the UK, DC, whatever, if it's old, you haven't really got a clue, or it's on your mind, or you're actively transferring at the moment, get in touch below via the calendar link to find a day and a time which is suitable for you. How an advice process works here at Cameron James. There's no cost ever for any of our appointments here at Cameron James. We don't work for free by the end, but we will put together a free advice report for you confirming exactly how your Royal London plan has performed over a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year period, how that compares to a Cameron James portfolio, and all of the information that you would need to make an educated and informed decision, where we recommend you to transfer, why, the trustee, the custodian, etc., for you to be in an educated and informed position. Jonathan, I've almost forgotten what I was going to ask you, but in terms of what you just said about clients, I think it's really interesting that there unfortunately seems to be this mantra, particularly, and I'm going to hate on UK clients here, I don't know why, but UK clients compared to, say, US clients are much more on the ball. And they know, okay, I'm in my late 30s or early 40s. I need to get my money growing now so it takes the pressure off in retirement. In the UK, and obviously not everyone, but a lot of UK clients seem to think, oh, I don't need to do any retirement planning until I'm about to retire. There was a client just yesterday dealing with one of our financial advisors who said, he was meant to be retiring this summer. His company just offered him a 1-year extension. Said, maybe I'll do the transfer next summer. And it's like, why? You literally need to get your capital growing, or at least optimize for the level of risk that you're taking. John, why is it that you think a lot of UK clients in particular don't really focus on these things until they're very close to retirement. They're in their 50s or 55 or 60 before they actually sit down and look at this paperwork and think, Christ, maybe I should be doing something different.
Yeah, so I think the overwhelming thing is that, I think it's a culture thing. Us Brits, we are a kind of bury our head in the sand, don't admit problems, realise problems until it's too late or until it's really at the deadline. So a lot of times we'll just put off, retirement planning, that sounds uncomfortable, that sounds finicky, that sounds like number crunching, that sounds like what I don't want to do on my Sunday after I've just had a long, hard week and I've got Monday work tomorrow when I'm doing more number crunching. So I think definitely there is a cultural thing there where, we put things off. And then the other side, the other side to it is that, we're very risk averse in general. If you compare the sort of general attitude, and I know you brought up the US there, US, which might be, you could argue it's a bit of the other extreme, but there's a lot of people in the UK who go, I'm getting 4% for my cash account, that's good enough for me, and don't quite realise it's not. If you're only 4% on your investments, you're probably going to have a terrible retirement unless you've got loads and loads and loads of money, because you're not going to be keeping up with inflation, you're not going to be growing the pot, you're not going to be able to go off and do these things, etc. So it's definitely a combination of cultural and also just our risk-averse nature, whereas the US, as you brought up, they're a much more gung-ho approach and much more willing to deal with the levels of volatility. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, if you say, hey, I'll give you 4%, 5% a year, and it will just grow like clockwork, you're never really going to see it go down very much. It's not going to chop and change. You're not going to grow serious wealth, but you'll grow some consistent wealth. Or I offer you the other option is your money's going to triple, quadruple over 20, 30 years, very likely. But you shouldn't look at don't go looking at your brokerage account too much because it's going to go up and down quite a lot. Most Brits will take the smooth conservative approach, even if objectively it's more often than not the worst option. Whereas in America, most people would go, I don't care about that. I can turn it off. I know, I understand it. I don't mind the volatility. I can ride it out. I've got a good financial advisor who can talk me off the ledge when I feel like jumping. And they'll go and take the high volatility, high return, high risk, high reward approach, and they'll have a much more well-funded, put it better words, retirement than us Brits will. So I think that's it. And I think, not to go off on like a slight tangent here, but you can see that with the local changes, and the FCA is trying to bring it out now with this simplified advice, and then this all kind of, this advice guidance boundary. And you can even see it now, we're talking at the beginning of July with the discussions around cash ISAs and lifetime ISAs. And fundamentally, as Brits, we've got too much money in cash, and it's all about, hey, how can we get more money? Not a silly amount of money, make sure you've got your rainy day savings there. And if you've got an unforeseen expense, you've got the cash at hand. But anything you're not going to touch for 5-10 years, go and get it invested into the global stock market or other investments. And, you can see there's an attempt to try and get that driven. And at the moment in the UK, we're property addicts. We have a house and we have a bank account. That's how most people operate. And that's not going to necessarily be very good for a good retirement.
Indeed. So, Jonathan, would you say that clients are limited in their investment choice with Royal London?
Yes. So, two things to consider Royal London. There are a menu of options. There are a few pensions out there. One of the ones I'm transferring at the moment, part of a big consolidation, some other financial planning, was known as the Royal London Talisman Scheme. And this chap is paying 1.76% a year in total ongoing charges. Which is obviously incredibly high. There's no financial advice there. That's just bundled charges, the bundled AMC plus the additional charges, because he's chosen some kind of more convoluted, risky funds, which again, performance-wise, haven't done too terribly. But obviously the fees are incredibly high. So that's the big consideration to look at Royal London for all residents. But yeah, to answer your question.
And so would you say clients can reduce their costs or improve flexibility by transferring to, for example, a SIPP?
Yes. So obviously, it depends if you're going to be taking the ongoing advice route, you're going to get advice from an advisor. So you've got to take that into account. But from a pure platform, SIPP provider cost, SIPP trustee cost, whatever it is, platform in underlying investments, you'd be actually quite hard pressed not to reduce your fees, such as, the 1% bundled charges. The platforms, 35, 0.35% and often much lower these days. Underlying investments might be 0.14 to 0.3%. Obviously, some more expensive funds out there. There's a really good chance that, you're going to be significantly reducing fees. Of course, now you've got, there's more options out there, which means there's more options to make bigger mistakes and choose different funds. So you do have a menu of Royal London, but, that additional flexibility and ability to save costs is huge.
So what would you give as summary? What's the process to transfer a Royal London pension in 2025?
Yeah, so again, let me just add as well before I go on to the transfer process is everything I've said so far is very much relative to UK residents, non-UK residents. It all applies. There is one huge thing that we should bring up with Royal London, which involves non-UK residents. And that is that Royal London does not accept, from what we've been told and from our personal experience, will not allow a non-UK resident beneficiary, which basically means, your loved ones abroad, you leave it to after you pass away, to take over the pension and open up a new Royal London pension. But whilst many schemes, if not most pensions, have this rule for non-UK residents, Royal London won't even allow you to transfer it out. Their only option, from our own experience, is to pay it out as a giant taxable lump sum. So invariably, we get a lot of people approaching us saying, hey, I've moved to Spain, I've moved to America, my wife's with me, my kids are with me, or my kids have moved abroad. And again, this will also apply for you. If you live in the UK and you've got kids who moved abroad, Royal London is all but certainly not the place you want to have your money. And that is because if you pass away, and they're abroad, that money is going to go to them in one giant taxable sum. Whether you die, whether it's tax-free in the UK or not tax-free in the UK, if you've got clients abroad, is almost certainly, again, no guarantees, but very likely to be fully taxable or very heavily taxable locally. And you thinking, hey, I'm going to pass on £1 million to my loved ones in America, it might end up being more like £500,000 to your loved one in America.
Yeah, and I think this is a massive point. And I mean, Royal London are not the only UK pension scheme, and it just underlines the point again that for non-UK residents, on top of all the other stuff we talked about, performance, this thing about beneficiaries and survivors' pensions, etc., is extremely important. Your loved ones, whether it be your kids, your spouse, your husband, your wife, could be looking at a significant tax bill on a pension pot that you thought you'd be passing on to them, could actually get slashed almost in half, depending upon that person's income tax rate. So really, really important point. And we've actually seen, we actually had a funny example, Jonathan, if you remember your clients, I believe they're based in Australia and the US, their father passed away, passed on this Royal London pension. Jonathan did months and months worth of advice and work, and they said, right, great, yeah, we want to do it. Well, then we actually got in touch and Royal London said they couldn't just split the pension and continue managing it, and that it needed to be drawn down, etc. So yeah, a really, really important point there.
Yeah, and that was actually where we even though we deal in this, we're experts in this, we come across it. That was for us almost shocking as well, because it's one thing to not accept non-UK residents and go, hey, I'm sorry, your mum passed away. Here's your pension. By the way, we can't open the pension for you, but here's a form, fill it out, and go and transfer it to someone who hopefully will be able to help you. But to actually go, no, that's completely off the table. Here's the only option, which is a big bank transfer. Which again, depending on when and where it might be, if your parents pass away after 75, there's going to be a huge UK tax bill you've got to pay. Then you might have to reclaim that. Then you've got to pay tax here, you've got to pay tax there. And the next thing you know, you're spending the next 12 months dealing with lawyers and tax accountants. So you pay loads of tax, and you probably add another 5% of bills or whatever it is to all the attorneys and tax accountants you pay to make sure you are paying the right tax in the first place. And unfortunately, this is a huge ticking time bomb for those with non-UK beneficiaries inside these Royal London personal pensions. So that's why I sort of implore anyone, if you're moving abroad or you've got family abroad, you're passing it on to, Royal London is probably, from my experience, probably about as worst the provider you could have for that. And again, we can back that up with experience, hearing it from the horse's mouth and knowing what all the other options are from other pension providers or the main pension providers out there.
Yeah, thank you, John, for clarifying that for specifically for non-UK residents. So, John, for UK residents, non-UK residents, what's the transfer process of a Royal London pension in 2025 at time of recording?
Yeah, so the thing with Royal London is, we go through the normal formal advice process. As you always document, we'll go through, we'll do a comparison, we'll do an analysis between fees and charges. Make sure, because obviously we're only going to advise you to transfer if there's there's objectively an overwhelming rationale or suitability to do so. So we'll do that. You submit all the transfers in. Again, it depends, UK, non-UK. This process is very much the same. If you're going for the advised route, especially, but just in general anyway, you submit all that. That'll then take a few weeks. They're very likely then to provide you or require you to do a due diligence questionnaire. The Royal London one, the last one I saw, was pretty lengthy. All sorts of questions. Did you get cold called? That's a big one. That's the number one kind of scam flag. If you tick back, your transfer is very likely blocked. And that's obviously a good warning for anyone, getting cold called. But, there's all sorts of things there. Do you know how you're being invested? Do you know about the new pension scheme? Do you know the ongoing charges? Do you know this? Who gave you the advice? Are they regulated? Are they this? Fill that all out, submit that all off. And then there's a good chance, you'll go through the new scam process. Again, extra level of caution with these schemes. And there'll be what's known as a money helper course. A money helper is an independent, government scheme, party scheme, like quasi-regulator that will effectively help you make sure that you're making an informed, rational decision and you're not going to be subject to any sort of scam. So they'll have a call with you, make sure you understand everything, make sure you're not being coerced, make sure you're informed. This is a decision of your own volition. There's no warnings, anything that flags up on their end. And then if that all goes smoothly, they'll then effectively issue a code. That code you'll send on to, your scheme, send on to Royal London. Royal London will then process it. But again, it can take anywhere from 4 weeks to 12 weeks. It really does depend. And there are some quirks, because sometimes you might have a Royal London standard. Maybe there was an old pension they bought and rolled over. So there can be delays there. Maybe it's slightly longer if you're outside the UK than inside the UK, although our experience is it's not actually that big a difference.
So you actually answered my second question there, John. I was going to ask you typically how long it takes. And again, how long is a piece of string? It comes down to the client's own independent situation, where they're based in the world. Typically speaking, UK resident client transfers happen faster because, for example, in the UK, we're a keen user of AJ Bell, household name in the UK. For non-UK resident clients, you might not be able to use the likes of AJ Bell as you are a non-UK resident. So the SIPP provider may be slightly less well known. So the scheme in the UK may do additional due diligence. John, can you have a quick chat about drawdown and retirement income options? Generally speaking, can a Royal London defined contribution pension be used for flexible drawdown?
Yeah, so in my experience, for the most part, Royal London will allow, flexible drawdown. I don't have any knowledge that they don't. Obviously, the ability to manage cash flow is slightly more challenging with the additional things. But no, from my experience, you can get flexible drawdown with Royal London.
And what would be an example of, say, an advantage of being inside a SIPP? And say, for example, you have planned annual expenditure, or you have a big one-off cost coming, say, you're going to spend 10 grand on a certain extension or this or that. What can be a benefit of managing money inside a SIPP as opposed to, say, a Royal London pension, where it might not be so easy for clients to control it with a financial advisor?
Yes, obviously from an admin point of view, it's much more streamlined. The buying and selling process is easier. It's easy. You've got better online access. Just like any type of SIPP, you'll have the ability for more flexible access. You'll have the ability to control the way you draw down. You've got better online access variably. You might have less funds. It might be simpler. It might be the ability to do the quote unquote two pots approach, where you can invest in a money market fund to help smooth some volatility. There is a lot more ability to control things inside a SIPP than with Royal London. Typically a much smoother, quicker process as well. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff from that point of view.
So John, if you could give us a real case example. So I know you mentioned about the client sort of circa 18 months ago who was getting advice from you. What has their experience been since they joined Cameron James? What have you done with them in terms of financial planning since they left Royal London? And what, if any, feedback have you had from them since they took that sort of leap of faith, so to speak, of moving away from a provider they've been with for some years, I expect?
Yeah, so, the example, you've just referenced there is a client of mine in Spain who just moved to Spain with his family, done all his saving, done all his investing, and was now looking, obviously, to enjoy themselves in the sun. So, we did a big consolidation to him. He came to us. He had a referral from a friend, so we were sort of, not that we like to get in dog and pony shows, but we'll hold up and say, hey, look, ours is as good as it gets, so we have no issues with that. So I did a big consolidation advice report for him, showed him the value of financial planning and all the other aspects that can be beneficial for someone who's got these cross-border assets, got a cross-border life, retiring abroad, and all the kind of complications that could bring. So we did a big financial plan, cash flow model, showed him how it all looked. Now, of course, we saved a lot of fees from the investment side of things, and obviously, once he saw the report, he absolutely loved it. Even though the alternative was a referral, decided to move ahead with Cameron James. So we've gone ahead, moved everything across. We also did a big investment for him as well. He had significant cash holdings again. A little bit like reference to what we brought up earlier about you Brits sometimes being a bit conservative. He had lots and lots, sitting in cash deposits that, weren't earning very much. So, the advice was, okay, look, keep your certain amount of money in your rainy day fund, make sure your bank account's funded so you can go and do all these things. But anything you're not looking to touch, for a few years, and especially even longer than that, let's go and get it invested and generating a good return. So that's what we did. So, consolidation, a couple of pensions, onto a SIPP, and then we did a brokerage account, an investment account for him, or a style account for him. And, just for reference here, despite everything that's gone on in the world, all the craziness, nuclear threats and, trade wars and all this kind of stuff, elections all around the world, we first got everything invested in the middle of September 2023. And despite that, only being, 20 months later, if that, and despite the fact we've got him in active drawdown, so he's been taking money out, he's done a couple of big lifestyle purchases. I believe one of them was a camper van. We helped do all the assessment of. He's netted, and by the way, net returns in Cameron James. We don't care what the gross returns are. What's the actual net returns, net of all fees actually sitting in your pocket over that period? Is just under 16% a year. So that is his portfolio, despite he's taking out money and had to take out money sometimes when the market was down, because that's when he needed it. And despite everything that's going on, and despite, initial advice fees for the 6-month process this all took, and ongoing advice and all platform charges and underlying fund charges, it's an annualized rate of nearly 8% a year. And that is in a balanced portfolio. And when we compare that to where he was before, where he'd been treading water for many years, unsurprisingly, he's an incredibly, the family in general are incredibly chuffed, because they're actually seeing the pot grow, which is obviously incredibly important, if not the most important thing. But he's also got me there as a sounding board. We meet twice a year formally, several times more than that if there's anything in particular going on, and has absolutely loved it, and hence why they gave us a very nice Google review as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear with clients here, when we talk about these sorts of returns, people are thinking, oh God, wow, like Cameron James must be some type of experts or the people in the room who know something someone else doesn't know. No, we are just keeping investing extremely simple, globally diversified, low-cost portfolios with a large majority of it tracking the markets, whether that be the S&P 500 or the European markets or the MSCI World, whatever it might be. But again, very careful when we discuss passive investing, because you have to have active decisions on which underlying funds to hold, which geographical locations, etc. So whilst we keep it low cost, we do have our investment committee here, which does a huge amount of work in creating those returns in the portfolios. But again, we'll be the first ones that Cameron James to appreciate and say, we cannot control the market returns. We cannot promise our clients what they're going to get, but we will continue to keep a low-cost, globally diversified portfolios, which in our experience is one of the very best ways to manage money, unless, of course, you're Warren Buffett and you're perhaps an absolute superstar at going in and out of companies, but when you've got 70 years experience, it's maybe a bit easier. So Jonathan, for any Royal London users out there, whether in the UK, non-UK, whatever, what would be your advice to them as kind of like a roadmap? If they're thinking, okay, maybe this all sort of resonates with me, I'm not sure if my Royal London is amazing actually. What would be your roadmap to them in terms of getting regulated and authorised advice and hopefully potentially looking to improve their retirement or stretching how far their retirement funds may be able to go with better growth or better flexibility or being able to pass the money on to their beneficiaries?
Yeah, so absolutely, like all things, reach out to a good qualified financial advisor, like ourselves. But, there's many other good ones out there. If you've got any referrals, any friends who, this is especially for non-UK residents, referrals are obviously a good thing if they've had a good experience. Perhaps, there's others out there, although, word of caution there. But, go and have a financial advisor, sit down with a financial advisor and go and look under the hood, and you'll be amazed what you're going to see. And you know what? You might go through the process and you look at everything and actually everything's really good. It's suitable for you. You don't have any of the non-UK issues. The performance is good enough. The fees or whatever, there's no real thing, need to do it. But there's a really good chance in our view that, that's probably not what you're going to find. And, go and work and have a collaborative approach with a financial advisor who's going to help you figure out if there are better options out there and what they are. And let's be honest, how much they're all going to cost and, whether they're worth it.
Yeah, understood. Well, thank you very much for your input today, Jonathan. I know you've had lots of Royal London clients, so I appreciate that. And as always, viewers, if you've had a good experience, bad experience, any experience of our Royal London, please put it in the comment section below so you can help and share education for other people. And as always, if you want to have a conversation with us, you can reach out for a free consultation. And take care with UK Pension Assets.